The transport ship hadron's edge screamed through space as its hull cracked under pressure. Captain Kim Taiho gripped his chair as sparks flew from the control panels round him. Warning lights flashed red across the bridge while alarms blared. Their deadly song, "Captain, the containment pods are failing," shouted his first officer, Lieutenant Bai Min-su. His face was pale with fear as he watched the readings on his screen. "The neural restraints are offline." Taiho's heart sank. They were carrying the most dangerous cargo in the known galaxy. A Vorthok Warbeast bound for the maximum security prison on Kepler Station. The creature inside Pod 7 had been the Coalition's greatest weapon until it had killed 3 of its handlers during a training exercise. Now it was being transported to a facility where it would spend the rest of its life in isolation. But that plan was falling apart along with their ship. The Vorthok-designated VX-7 was unlike anything nature had ever created. Standing 12 feet, tall on powerful legs, its body was covered in dark scales that could adapt to deflect energy weapons. 6 crystalline spines ran down its back, each one sharp enough to cut through steel. Its elongated skull held 6 glowing eyes ranged in pairs, and its massive jaws contained rows of teeth designed for tearing through armor plating. The creature had been bioengineered by the Zen-3 Empire as the perfect soldier from birth. It was conditioned through neural implants that delivered excruciating pain whenever it disobeyed commands. The Vorthaks knew only obedience through suffering. And they had never learned any other way to exist. "Sir, we're losing orbit," Min-su called out. "The gravity well is pulling us toward New Eden." New Eden was a human colony world with nearly 50,000 settlers. If the Vorthok reached the surface alive and free, those people would have no chance against it. Human weapons were primitive compared to Coalition technology, and they're defensive. Systems were designed to handle pirates and raiders, not engineered killing machines. The ship shuddered violently as it hit the planet's atmosphere. Through the view screen, Taiho could see the blue and green world growing larger by the second. Somewhere down there, families were going about their daily lives, completely unaware that death was falling from the sky. "Emergency pods are launching automatically," reported Min-su, including Pod 7. Taiho watched helplessly as the containment pod carrying VX-7 separated from the ship and streaked toward the planet's surface. The pod's emergency systems were designed to keep prisoners alive during a crash, which meant the Vorthok would survive the landing. Without its neural restraints, nothing would stop it from doing what it was created to do. Kill. The pod crashed into the research district of New Eden Colony with the force of a small meteor. The impact crater was 20 feet wide and filled with twisted metal and sparking electronics. For several minutes, nothing moved except the smoke rising from the wreckage. Then the pod's emergency hatch exploded outward. VX-7 emerged from the ruins like a nightmare-given form. Its scales rippled from black to deep red as they adapted to the new environment. The creature's 6 eyes swept across the unfamiliar landscape, taking in the human buildings and strange architecture. Pain receptors in its skull fired constantly, without the regulatory implants, creating a maddening sensation that drove it into a rage. The Vorthok's first roar shook windows across the colony. The sound was unlike anything the human settlers had ever heard. Part growl, part shriek, and entirely terrifying. It was the sound of something that had been created for one purpose only. Colonial Defense Lieutenant Park Ji-woo was eating lunch when the emergency alert came through his communicator. "All units respond to Grid 77. Unknown hostile has breached colony perimeter." Ji-woo grabbed his plasma rifle and ran for his patrol vehicle, calling for backup as he drove toward the research district. He had dealt with raiders and wild animals before, but something about this alert felt different. The panic in the dispatcher's voice suggested this was no ordinary threat. He arrived to find chaos. 3 buildings had been reduced to rubble, their walls torn apart as if by giant claws. Deep gouges in the metal surfaces showed where something incredibly strong had raked its talons across the structures. Strange purple blood splattered the ground. But there were no human casualties yet. That was about to change. Jiwoo's squad arrived just as the X-7 rounded the corner of the main laboratory building. The creature moved with predatory grace despite its massive size, each step making the ground tremble. When it saw the humans with their weapons, it let out another bone-chilling roar. Open fire. Jiwoo shouted. Plasma bolts lit up the air, striking the vortex scales and creating brief flashes of light. But the creature's adaptive hide absorbed the energy and turned it harmless. The beast charged forward, covering the distance between them in seconds. Jiwoo barely managed to dive aside as massive claws swept through the air where his head had been. His squad scattered, firing wildly as the vortex tore through their equipment like paper. Fall back. All units fall back. Jiwoo screamed into his communicator. This thing is unstoppable. As his men retreated, Jiwoo caught one last glimpse of the creature before he ran. The X-7 stood among the wreckage of their vehicles, its 6 eyes burning with ancient fury. This was what the galaxy's greatest military minds had created, a perfect weapon that obeyed no one and feared nothing. But they were wrong about one thing. Soon, the beast would encounter something that would change everything it thought it knew about the universe. 8-year-old Lee Do-yoon had always been the kind of child who worried her parents. While other children played safely in the colonies, recreation centers, she preferred exploring the maintenance tunnels and abandoned storage rooms that adults had forgotten about. Her mother, Dr. Choi Soo-jun, often said that curiosity would get Do-yoon into trouble someday. Today might be that day. The evacuation sirens had been wailing for 20 minutes, their sharp sounds echoing through every building in New Eden Colony. Families rushed toward the transport shuttles that would carry them to safety in the orbital stations above. But Do-yoon had a problem that no adult seemed to understand. Her pet rabbit, Snowball, was missing. The white rabbit had escaped from its cage during the chaos of the evacuation, while her mother was busy helping other scientists secure their research data. Do-yoon had slipped away from the shuttle boarding area. She knew exactly where Snowball would go when scared, the xenobiology laboratory where Do-yoon spent her afternoons. After school, the research district looked like a war zone. Broken glass covered the walkways, and several buildings had holes torn through their walls. Strange purple stains marked the ground in places, and the air smelled of melted metal and something else she could not identify. Do-yoon picked her way carefully through the debris, calling softly for her pet, Snowball. Here, Bunny, it's okay. I'm here. The main laboratory building where her mother worked had suffered damage to its outer walls, but the structure still stood. Do-yoon knew the security codes because she had watched her mother enter them hundreds of times. The automatic doors slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, the laboratory was a mess. Equipment lay scattered across the floor, and several of the specimen tanks had cracked, spilling their contents across the tiles. Emergency lighting cast strange shadows on the walls, making everything look different from the bright, clean space Do-yoon remembered. She found Snowball's tracks in the dust near the animal habitat section, the small rabbit prints. Led deeper, into the lab, toward the main research chamber where her mother studied alien biology samples. Do-yoon followed the trail, her small voice echoing in the damaged hallways. Snowball, please come out. We need to go to the shuttles. But when she entered the main chamber, she forgot all about her rabbit. Something massive stood in the center of the room, partially hidden by the shadows cast by broken equipment. At first, Daryun thought it might be one of the large specimen containers that had fallen over. Then it moved, and she realized she was looking at a living creature unlike anything she had ever seen. The thing was enormous, easily 3 times taller than any adult human. Its body was covered in dark scales that seemed to shimmer and change color in the emergency lighting. 6 glowing eyes watched her from an elongated skull, and crystalline spines ran down its back like a ridge of black diamonds. Massive claws scraped against the metal floor as it shifted its weight. Most children would have screamed. Most adults would have run. But Daryun had spent her entire life round her mother's work with alien creatures. And she had learned to look past the frightening appearance to see the living being underneath. This creature was hurt. Purple blood seeped from all wounds along its flanks where metal restraints had torn free. Its breathing was labored and uneven, and it held one of its arms at an awkward angle. The way it moved reminded Daryun of the injured animals her mother sometimes brought home, careful and protective of its wounds, but ready to fight if threatened. "Oh," Daryun said quietly, her voice carrying clearly in the damaged laboratory. "You're hurt?" The creature's 6 eyes fixed on her with an intensity that should have been terrifying. Its head tilted slightly, as if it was trying to understand what it was seeing. In all of its existence, the Vorthik had never encountered a being that looked upon it without fear or hatred. Every human, Zen 3, or coalition soldier it had ever met had either tried to hurt it or control it through pain. The neural implants in its skull had made sure it associated all contact with other beings as a source of suffering. But this small creature showed no signs of aggression or fear. Daryun took a small step forward, her dark eyes filled with the same concern she had shown to every injured bird or lost pet she had ever found. "Are you scared? It's okay. I won't hurt you." The Vorthik had been created as the perfect weapon. Its genetic programming included enhanced strength, adaptive armor, and combat instincts that made it nearly unstoppable in battle. But nothing in its design had prepared it for this moment. The creature made a low sound that was not quite a growl. It was trying to understand why this tiny being was not running away. Every instinct told it to attack, to eliminate this potential threat, before it could call for help. But something held it back. The small human continued to watch it with those strange, gentle eyes. She seemed to be waiting for something, but not in the way that handlers waited for obedience. This was different, patient and kind in a way the Vorthik had never experienced. For the first time in its violent existence, the creature felt something other than pain or rage. It was confused and uncertain, but also strangely calm. The constant anger that had driven it since its escape was fading, replaced by curiosity about this unusual encounter. Outside the laboratory, military forces were preparing for a final assault. Inside, a small human child was about to prove that sometimes the gentlest voice could accomplish what the strongest weapons could not. Lieutenant Park Jiwoo crouched behind his armored vehicle, sweat dripping down his face despite the cool evening air. Through his binoculars, he could see the research laboratory where the creature had taken refuge. Thermal scanners showed 2 heat signatures inside, one massive and inhuman, the other heartbreakingly small. "Sir, we have confirmation," reported Sergeant O'Minho, his voice tight with concern. "There's a child trapped in there with that thing." Jiwoo closed his eyes for a moment. In his 10 years of military service, he had faced raiders, hostile wildlife, and even rogue military units. But he had never been forced to make a decision like this. If they waited much longer, the creature might kill the child. If they attacked now, their weapons would likely destroy the entire building. "Orbital strike team is standing by," came the voice of Commander Yan Seojun through the comm system. "We can level the entire structure in 30 seconds. "Negative," Jiwoo replied firmly. There's still a civilian inside. Lieutenant, that child is probably already dead. We cannot risk the entire colony for one person. Jiwoo knew the commander was right from a tactical standpoint. The creature had already destroyed 3 buildings and could tear through the colony's defenses like paper. Every minute they delayed gave it more time to cause devastation. But the thought of deliberately killing a child made his stomach turn. Inside the laboratory, Doyoon was completely unaware of the military forces surrounding the building. Her entire attention was focused on the wounded creature before her. She had found a first aid kit in one of the undamaged storage cabinets and was carefully cleaning the purple blood from its injuries. The Vorthok remained perfectly still as the small human worked. This was beyond its understanding. Throughout its existence, any contact with other beings had brought pain. The neural implants had made sure of that, yet this tiny creature touched it with gentle hands. Causing no harm, You noticed the creature flinch whenever she moved too quickly. It reminded her of the stray dogs that sometimes wandered into the colony. Animals that had been hurt so many times they expected every human contact to bring more suffering. It's okay, she whispered softly, the way her mother had taught her to speak to frightened animals. I'm not going to hurt you. I just want to help. The Vorthok's 6 eyes tracked her every movement, but its aggressive posture had relaxed. The constant tension in its muscles was fading, replaced by something that might have been curiosity. It made small rumbling sounds as she worked, almost like a cat purring. Outside, the military situation was becoming desperate. More units had arrived, surrounding the laboratory with enough firepower to level a city block. Jiwoo could see the worry on his soldiers' faces. They all had families in the colony, and everyone knew what the creature was capable of doing. Sir, we're running out of time, Minho said quietly. If that thing gets out of the building. Jiwoo nodded grimly. He was about to give the order for the orbital strike when his communicator crackled to life. This is Dr. Choi Sujin requesting immediate access to the perimeter, came a woman's voice, thick with panic. My daughter is in that building. Minutes later, a transport vehicle raced through the military checkpoint. Dr. Choi Sujin jumped out before it had fully stopped, her face pale with terror. She was a small woman with kind eyes, but right now she looked ready to fight through an army to reach her child. Where is she? Sujin demanded, grabbing Jiwoo by the arm. Where is Doyoon? Mom, I'm sorry, but your daughter is trapped inside with the creature. We've tried to establish contact, but you don't understand, Sujin interrupted. Doyoon doesn't see dangerous animals. She sees hurt creatures that need help. If she's still alive, it's because she's trying to take care of that thing. Inside the laboratory, Doyoon had finished cleaning the Vorthok's wounds as best she could. The creature seemed calmer now, its breathing steady and its eyes less wild. But she could tell it was still in pain, not just from its injuries, but from something deeper. She had seen this before in the animals her mother rehabilitated. Sometimes creatures that had been hurt too many times forgot how to trust. They lived in constant fear, ready to attack anything that came near them. The Vorthok suddenly tensed, its head turning toward the entrance. Doyoon could hear voices outside, adult voices speaking in urgent, frightened tones. She realized that people were coming, and they would probably try to hurt her new friend. Don't be scared, she said softly, placing her small hand on the creature's massive arm. They don't understand you like I do. The Vorthok rose to its full height, muscles coiling for combat. Its claws extended and its spines began to glow with an inner light. Every instinct told it that more enemies were approaching, and it needed to fight or flee. Doyoon stood up as well, positioning herself between the creature and the door. She looked up at the towering beast with her calm, gentle eyes, and spoke in the same patient tone she used with all frightened animals. Set, the word carried no threat, no promise of punishment. It was simply a request from someone who cared, for the first time in its existence. The Vorthok heard a command that was not backed by pain or fear. Slowly, incredibly, the massive creature lowered itself to the ground. Dr. Choi Sujin pushed through the line of soldiers, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Lieutenant Park Ji-woo tried to stop her, but she shoved past him with strength born of desperation. Her 8-year-old daughter was somewhere inside the damaged building with the most dangerous create. You're in the known galaxy, Mom. You cannot. Go in there, Ji-woo called after her. That thing will kill you both. Sujin paused at the laboratory entrance, her hand on the door controls. You don't know my daughter, she said quietly. And you don't understand what that creature really is. As the colony's lead xenobiologist, Sujin had studied the reports about Vorthok Warbeasts for years. She knew they were bioengineered weapons, created by the Zenthri Empire to be perfect soldiers. But she also knew something the military reports never mentioned. Every living creature, no matter how it was created, had the capacity to learn and change. The laboratory doors slid open with a soft hiss. Sujin stepped inside, moving slowly and keeping her hands visible. Behind her, she could hear the soldiers taking defensive positions, their weapons trained on the entrance. The main research chamber looked like a battlefield. Equipment lay scattered. Across the floor, specimen tanks were cracked and leaking, and purple bloodstains marked the walls where the creature had torn free from its restraints. But in the center of the destruction, Sujin saw something that made her stop breathing. Doyun sat cross-legged on the floor next to the Vorthok, speaking to it in the same gentle voice she used with injured animals. The massive creature rested nearby, its 6 eyes watching her daughter with what could only be described as attention, not the predatory focus of a hunter, but the curious interest of an intelligent being trying to understand something new. Doyun, Sujin whispered, afraid that any sudden sound might break whatever spell her daughter had created. Mama, Doyun turned with a bright smile, as if sitting next to a 12-foot warbeast was the most natural thing in the world. Look, I found him hurt and scared. I've been helping him feel better. The Vorthok's head turned toward Sujin, its massive frame tensing slightly, but it made no aggressive moves. Instead, it seemed to be studying her, trying to determine if this new human posed a threat. Sujin had spent her career working with alien species, but she had never been this close to a Vorthok before. Every detail of its construction spoke of deliberate engineering. The adaptive scales, the crystalline spines, the arrangement of its multiple eyes for maximum battlefield awareness. This was a creature designed for one purpose only, yet it sat calmly beside her daughter, allowing a small human child to touch its wounds and speak to it with kindness. Lieutenant Ji-woo appeared in the doorway behind her, his weapon raised but not aimed directly at the creature. Dr. Choi, step away from your daughter slowly. We have snipers positioned to take the shot. No, Sujin said firmly, not taking her eyes off the Vorthok. Lower your weapons, all of you. Ma'am, that's not possible. That thing is a cluster threat. It's killed dozens of trained soldiers. It's also responding to my daughter in a way that should be impossible, Sujin replied. She moved slowly toward Doyun, her mind racing as she observed the creature's behavior. Their neural conditioning was designed to make them respond only to pain-based commands. But Doyun isn't trying to control it. Doyun looked up at her mother with innocent eyes. He doesn't like being told what to do, Mama, but he likes it when I ask nicely. The simple truth of that statement hit Sujin like a physical blow. The military had spent decades trying to control Vortex through dominance and punishment, never considering that these creatures might respond to a different approach entirely. "What's his name?" Sujin asked, settling down beside her daughter. "I call him Keeper," Doyun said, reaching out to gently touch one of the creature's claws. "Because he's been keeping himself safe all alone. But now, he doesn't have to." Vorthok, Keeper, made a low rumbling sound that vibrated through the floor. It was not the aggressive growl they had heard during its rampage, but something softer, almost like contentment. Jiu stepped further into the room, his weapon still ready but no longer aimed at the creature. "How is this possible? The reports say these things are incapable of non-violent behavior." Sujin watched as Dayun showed Keeper how to stack some of the undamaged equipment containers. The massive creature using the tips of its claws with surprising delicacy. The reports were written by people who only saw these beings as weapons. They never considered that underneath the conditioning and engineering, there might still be a thinking, feeling creature. "But the neural implants are gone," Sujin observed, pointing to the scarred areas on Keeper's skull where the control devices had torn free during the crash. For the first time in its life, this creature is free to make its own choices about how to behave. Keeper carefully placed another container on the growing stack. His 6 eyes focused intently on the task. When the stack wobbled but didn't fall, he made that rumbling sound again, and Doyun clapped her hands in delight. "Good job, Keeper. You're getting really good at this." Jiu lowered his weapon completely, staring in amazement. The galaxy's most feared Warbeast was playing games with a human child. And both of them seemed to be enjoying it. "This changes everything," Sujin whispered, understanding the full implications of what she was witnessing. "If one Vorthok can learn to trust, maybe they all can." 3 days after the incident, Admiral Yunhaijin stood in the makeshift command center that had been set up in New Eden Colony's main hall. Reports from across the galaxy filled her desk, urgent messages from Coalition Command, requests for information from alien governments, and most surprising of all, a formal petition from the Zen-3 Empire asking for human assistance with their own Vorthok facilities. The news had spread faster than anyone expected. A human child had accomplished what the galaxy's greatest military minds had failed to achieve in decades of research. She had turned a weapon of mass destruction into a peaceful companion through nothing more than kindness and patience, Admiral. "The transportation request has been approved," reported Captain Kim Tai-ho, who had survived the crash of his transport ship and was now coordinating the relief efforts. 3 more Coalition vessels with Vorthok prisoners are requesting emergency landings. Hygiene rubbed her temples. "How many total?" 17 creatures, ma'am. All of them scheduled for termination after various incidents. Their handlers believe they've become too dangerous to control. Through the window of the command center, Hyjin could see the temporary facility that had been constructed in the colony's research district. Dr. Choi Sujin worked there around the clock, documenting every interaction between humans and the Vorthok designated as Keeper. Her daughter Dayun visited every day after school, treating the massive creature like an oversized pet. The transformation had been remarkable to witness. Keeper had learned to communicate through a series of sounds and gestures, expressing preferences for certain foods and activities. He showed clear emotional responses to different situations: contentment when Dayun visited, curiosity when presented with new objects, and something that looked very much like affection when interacting with the humans who treated him kindly. Most shocking of all, he had begun to show protective behavior toward the colony's children. "Admiral, you need to see this," called Dr. Sujin from across the room. She was reviewing footage from the security cameras installed in Keeper's enclosure. The video showed Dayun and Sev or other children playing a simple ball game with Keeper. The massive creature moved with careful precision, using just the tips of his claws to gently roll the ball back to the children. When one of the younger boys tripped and scraped his knee, Keeper immediately moved to shield the child from further harm, making concerned rumbling sounds until an adult arrived to help. He's learned to recognize when humans are hurt or in distress, Sujin explained. His protective instincts have been redirected from warfare to caregiving. Hyjin shook her head in amazement. The Zenthri spent 50 years trying to create the perfect killer. Instead, they created something that naturally wants to protect the innocent. The neural conditioning suppressed those instincts, Sujin continued. But once the implants were removed and he was shown an alternative way to interact with others, his true nature emerged. A commotion outside drew their attention. The first of the incoming transport ships was landing in the colony's expanded spaceport. This vessel carried 5 Vorthax, all of them considered too dangerous for standard containment. Their neural implants had been removed during transport, leaving them in the same confused and angry state that Keeper had experienced after his crash. Are you sure about this? Hyjin asked Sujin. These creatures have killed their handlers. They're in full rage mode. That's exactly why we need to help them, Doyun said, appearing at her mother's side with the confidence that only children possess. They're scared and hurt. Just like Keeper was, they need someone to show them that not all people want to cause them pain. The unloading process took several hours. Each Vorthak was carefully moved to a separate enclosure where they could decompress. Without feeling threatened, the creatures paced restlessly, their scales shifting colors as they tried to adapt to their new environment. Then something unexpected happened. Keeper, who had been watching the proceedings from his own enclosure, began making a series of low calls. The other Vorthax stopped pacing and turned toward the sound. Keeper continued his vocalizations. And slowly, the other creatures began to respond. With similar sounds, they're communicating. Sujin breathed. I don't think anyone realized they had their own language. Over the following weeks, Keeper became the key to rehabilitating the other Vortex. He served as a bridge between the newly arrived creatures and their human caretakers, demonstrating through his own behavior that cooperation was possible. Doyun worked with each new rival, using the same patient approach that had worked with Keeper. Not every rehabilitation was successful. 2 of the Vorthax were too damaged by their conditioning to fully recover. But the majority began to show the same transformation that Keeper had experienced, from weapons of war to intelligent beings capable of friendship and compassion. The success of the New Eden project led to changes throughout the galaxy. The Coalition banned the use of neural pain implants on sentient creatures. The Zenthri Empire began dismantling their Warbeast program, instead of working with human specialists to rehabilitate the survivors. Doyun, now famous throughout human space as the girl who tamed the monsters, continued to visit the rehabilitation center every day. She never thought of what she did as particularly special. To her, she had simply helped some animals who were scared and hurt. But her simple act of kindness had proven something that military strategists and alien philosophers had debated for centuries, that compassion was not a weakness, but the greatest strength any species could possess. The galaxy was a little less dangerous now, and a little more hopeful, all because one small human child had looked at a monster and seen a friend.